There we go. Hey, boys and girls, it is Cursed Curator here
With ADOS, sorry, my microphone was having issues.
all good. So today we'll be covering the lovely 1910s of the medias. Yay.
Yes, this is a really big transitional point, I think, in my opinion at least, for media. We see a big deviation from the skits and the weird Méliès type films. Actually, we only see one Méliès film on this list, which is Conquest of the Pole. And largely, we're going to start seeing proper film. We see our first feature length films. Things are changing rapidly, and the industry is forming. Before we get into individual entertainment and specifically film, since that's largely the biggest portion, we are also concerned, or rather, it's also a note of concern that this is when Hollywood starts to take shape.
Ooh, boy.
Yes, and I think I mentioned it last episode, but do you know why they picked Los Angeles for Hollywood?
So I don't know the exact reason as to why they chose Los Angeles, but I do know they were skipping our boy Edison, wasn't that the case?
Yes, so the primary reason, at least legally speaking, was that Edison had a patent on cameras or film in general. He had one of those massive early 1900s super patents that basically gained him a monopoly. And by settling on the exact opposite end of the country, it ensured that they would be too far away to sue, at least practically. And what makes this in addition, well, is that since California is a desert, it doesn't rain much, which means you're not going to have to make rain checks very often for filming, especially in an era where a lot of people are filming on location outdoors and not in a studio.
Okay. Mm.
As well, it's a centralized area. There's a port, which means people can get to it. Good. It has a bunch of miscellaneous benefits that would be very useful for a burgeoning film industry, and is largely possibly the reason why America is such a huge media giant is because of Hollywood.
I'm kind of surprised there wasn't more effort to make more areas similar to Hollywood. It was also like a centralized there instead of being like a place like Vegas or like San Fran or even somewhere up in Oregon even.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the reason seems to be that everyone's there anyways. There's not really a ton of point to moving it.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that there weren't other good places to make a film industry. It's rather there wasn't any good reason to not do it in LA for a long time. We see in our modern period, a lot of filmmakers are moving away from LA simply because it's too expensive. But obviously, in the 1910s, this isn't a concern.
Hmm. Okay. The first film on our list is L'Inferno or El Inferno. I'm not Italian. I'm not going to try and speak their way.
I believe it's L'Inferno. This is one of the two adaptations of Dante's Inferno that both came out this exact year in 1911. The other one is incredibly low budget and I think is 11 minutes. I want to say something like that.
Give or take.
Yeah, but La Inferno is, I believe, several hours. It's an hour. And this is I quite enjoy this film. It is very early film, so you can tell that there's some kinks that you need to work out.
So, in my opinion, this film, the background work was damn amazing, and the effects were
Oh
pretty
yeah,
damn good too. My only true
the
issue,
souls flying from the beginning of the film was
yeah,
actually really impressive.
I really like that, and even though some modern films out of the water, at least in that regard, the only issue I had personally, because I couldn't find a film that actually like translated the actual slides or whatever. I don't speak Italian, so I didn't really understand the plot all too much. As a person who has never actually been in anything related to Dante's Inferno, I didn't understand what the fuck's going on.
The plot is really quite simple. Luckily, the plot is just Dante gets a tour through hell by an angel. That is essentially the plot of Dante's Inferno.
Lovely. I do have a fun fact for this film. This is the first film, the first feature film to be shown in its entirety in one screening in the United States. Prior to this, it was thought that that audience wouldn't sit around for an hour to watch a damn film because that's a lot of damn time. Film,
That is fair.
yeah, films like the Les Miserables and The Life of Moses were also, they were shown in episodic parts over a course over a month or two, which is a complete difference between one sitting and like entire month or so.
Yeah, we see this with a couple projects where we would refer to them as one film now, but they're what's called a serial, where they would show each episode essentially separately, and it was a larger project.
Yeah,
That does bring into the question because this film is an hour and 12 minutes. Would you say that this is feature length? Because I know a lot of people say it has to be 90 minutes to be feature length, which is why this film technically didn't qualify.
to me, it's feature length. I get now, but to Van, it has to be like one, doesn't it? It has to.
It's certainly much longer than every other film that we've talked about.
Yeah,
Again, like like we've said, it is an hour. So you could probably say it's the first feature film in technicality, or not by technicality, in practicality, excuse me.
yeah,
Either way, I enjoyed it. Even yes, even if it is very difficult to follow the plot because it is in Italian.
yeah. The next lovely film is The Cameraman's Revenge, and I have a whole thing for this one.
Before we get to it, actually, what would you give La Inferno out of 10?
Honestly, just for the background work alone, it gets to the M7. Just on that alone, that was so
Yeah,
good.
I gave it a 7. I think the effects are really nice, but it does drag out a little bit just because it is Dante's Inferno and the plot, the actual book is quite repetitive.
True.
But yes, The Cameraman's Revenge. This is a weird film. This is a animation about what would you describe the plot of The Cameraman's Revenge?
Oh, I'm sorry. The film is so silly. I couldn't take it seriously.
Before we say anything, this film is animated using actual bug corpses. Just to give you a visual, it's stop motion. And I think, from my viewing, the plot is essentially there's a cameraman who gets cheated on, and then
Yes,
he like films them having an affair and ruins their life.
yes. So Mr. Beetle, what was he wanted some companionship, so he got with Cameraman's wife, or excuse me, boyfriend. It was the boyfriend. And records this going down. And the question is, will Mr. Beetle, excuse me, Mrs. Beetle, forgive him? Which seemingly by the end of the film, that's very much the case. It does forgive him.
This is also our first Russian film we've talked about, I
Yeah.
believe.
I'm sorry, this is so silly.
It is like the plot is very serious and it sounds like something you'd see on a like a drama from the 20s, but this is a an animated film. It is important to mention that animation didn't quite have the association with children's media that it does now.
Hmm.
An animation could be anything for anybody. It was just another medium to tell stories. But yeah, this film is kind of ridiculous, but I kind of love it.
So there is a English version of this film. If you didn't know that, Old Oz. The English version has a completely different title, a completely different story, and it's about a brother and sister. It's about it. I don't know. It's a completely different film, but apparently it is the exact. It's supposed to be the exact alternate version.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So so it still uses bug corpses?
No, it's all about beer.
Oh, so it's not like stop motion.
No, it's completely different. I don't know why it's been called an alternate version.
That is interesting.
That's not the first time that ever happened with a movie though. It's been other cases where that has happened.
Yeah, we've had a lot of movies where it's like, what? Why did you remake this like 20 years later? This film that I assume is pretty obscure even by, in our instance, 1910 standards.
Yeah. I just love the idea that to replicate how human society is and how humans do their daily lives, instead of just using regular human actors, because I imagine it's a little expensive for these Russian guys considering what's all going on at the current time.
Yeah,
But
we are 2 years away from World War I breaking out. So, and also, did the Soviet Union like aren't they currently at war?
no, that has not happened yet. It wouldn't happen until like towards the point where Russia would pull out, because as you might know, the Germans gave them quite the thrashing, and the Soviets have no reason to rise up just yet.
Oh yeah, you're right. I got my timeline mixed up, but this is the closing years of the Russian Empire. Either way.
Yes, they are just about done. Ooh boy,
Yeah. What would you give the Cameraman's Revenge?
it was silly, but a silly movie like this one got me to laugh. So I want to say like a 6.5.
I gave it a 7. It's okay. It's fun. It's unique, if nothing
Oh
else.
yeah, it's extremely unique. Like that alone, like if I was to screen it like on uniqueness, this would be a 10. There's a lot more into the other than just being unique.
Indeed. We have probably the last Millier film we're going to watch in this series. So we're actually already gotten to the point where we've gone through what 30 years of film history, so we're already seeing eras come and go.
Mm-hmm.
This is Conquest of the Pole.
Ooh. So this this is a film that, so I'm gonna say is a complete banger. As I say that part, the imagery was fantastic and the plot was, but you see the real problem here. Just the background creature. It's as always for a week is nightmare fuel.
Yeah, the talking about the Yeti.
Yeah.
So, just a quick plot summary because I keep forgetting. This is it's a basic Millier film. Instead of going to the moon or going to the sun, this time Millier is going to the North Pole, and he meets a Yeti. And the Yeti seems to be built out of a bunch of puppets. I would say, like, there's one for the arms. I know that. And it is nightmare fuel, and it also looks incredibly rough.
Mm. I do have a fun fact about this film. You'll hear me say that quite a few times. Is
I'm scared.
so around this time in society for this time period, there was an ongoing feud between Robert E. Peary and Frederick Cook over who reached the North Pole first. Peary claimed that he reached it on April 6, 1909. However, Cook claimed that he did it a year earlier on the 21st of April, 1908. Millier said, "Nah, you're both pretending that you reached there first," and he said, "I'm gonna go there first instead."
But in film.
Yeah. So, I mean, who really beat who first? I mean, I clearly have proof that I went there. Do you?
Here's my movie where I met a Yeti. I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but I just love to imagine Millier just showing this film at a science exhibition, being like, "Yes, here's my documentary footage."
um,
Uh,
a a very neat
mhm.
a very neat little factoid about the Yeti there is that this will be a very important thing for later, at least for like for Americans, very least for our mythos and the Yeti, is that the abominable snowman would basically be directly linked to this creature in media, at
Really,
least.
this specific one.
Yes, in media, you'll see. I believe later on you'll see some very interesting characterizations of the future Yetis and abominable snowmans who look vaguely alike.
Fair. I do have one note about this movie when I rewatched it. Oh, I forgot about the fact that Millier hated suffragettes. There is a weird, like, out of nowhere segment where a bunch of suffragettes try to build their own thing to go to the North Pole, and because they're incompetent or whatever, it doesn't work, and
Oh
it makes me incredibly uncomfortable.
boy. I won't comment too much on it.
I gave it an 8. What do you think?
You know what? This will be one of the highest ones I'll be giving out. You'll see another one later. This is a 9.
You know what? I can understand that opinion. The next one is a bit weird, and this is a serialized series. Phantomas.
This is a this is a very near and dear to the heart because I am obsessed with the 1910s and 1920s style of clothing and buildings, especially the interiors. So I'm very biased on this film in particular.
Because
Um,
it features a lot of French fashion from the 1910s. You know, before that big war everyone keeps talking about happened.
yeah. The thing that really the villain was comical, very comical.
Yeah, there was. Phantomas is a strange series because it is one of the technically most competent as a story. Like, the plot is more so an actual plot than a lot of the things I've seen. However, it is very 1910s. It is very over the top. The acting is so silent era. Uh, I I go back and forth with this film a lot, or this serial. I like it, but I also kind of find it obnoxious.
I didn't care for the film all that much outside of my own personal biases. It just felt like it just felt kind of weak, and mind you, for the time it was probably a banger, but looking from a complete modern perspective, it was kind of I could just predict it was going to go that way, sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, it's always that problem where the film was probably good at the time, but we aren't in 1913, thank God. Uh,
You see, I'm fucked up. If I've ever had a kid, I'm like, hey, kid. We're in 1913 right now, and we're gonna watch all these films. I'm gonna show them all the media, give them all the clothes. I'm gonna gaslight. Oh my god, it's fucked up. I'm gonna stop. Like it's 2029. Yeah, I shrinked you.
I imagine with you, it would last a week.
Yes.
Which, I mean, at that point, it probably wouldn't be that bad. Yeah, it is also 5.5 hours, which makes it an absolute slog to get through.
Yes, and it's such great news in modern day where no movie outside of damn Godfather will reach that ever.
No, I think the longest movie that I've ever seen isn't until 1927,
Hmm.
and that movie is 7.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember how long the Godfather is, but you know what? It's time to see how long is
Little side tangent.
is the Godfather. Uh, really? Wow. I thought it was longer. It's only roughly okay. So if we include all movies together, it's way longer. But if we include this the first movie ever, it was just about 3 hours, give or take.
Which, as we can see by this episode, is nothing.
Yeah, but we include all together, it's like fucking like 10 hours, give or take. But
Oh,
we don't do that here. Um, the
we'll get there when we get there. You know, we'll
yeah
get to that movie eventually. We'll get to all the big hitters.
the next film is Cabaret. Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe it's Cabiria.
Okay, this
Oh,
film,
Phantomas. Sorry, I
yeah,
keep bothering you for it.
it's all
Rating.
good. Phantom Oz, I'm giving it a yeah, I'm be nice, a fucking five.
I again, this is because have tend to focus more on the historical perspective, even if it's wrong. I gave it an 8, just simply because of the storytelling innovations for the time.
Yeah,
But I can completely understand why you would give it a 5. I am not going to fight that one. Kabiria. This is often considered the first true feature length film, undebatably.
lovely. I have a lot of things to talk about this film, but I'm gonna shrink it down just a bit because
Yeah.
I'll be complaining a whole lot. But I'll get to the good things. The good things. So this covers.
Before we get to anything, so sorry.
Mhm.
Um, quick summary. This is based on a Greek epic, I believe, isn't it not?
Yes.
And it's one of those kind of Odyssey type films.
Yeah. So this is based around the direct war was the Punic War.
Oh yeah.
Yes. This is. I do like how the thing that really excited me was the large scale battle. That was really damn good. That was chef's kiss type of good. The
We're gonna see another one of those with Intolerance.
Yeah. The thing that I liked a lot about this film is that it was from my understanding in my research is it was one of the first films to utilize long tracking shots, and it was also the first to go on full scale elaborate designs for its backgrounds.
Yeah, this film is epic in scope. I believe we're gonna see this word a lot in the next like 20 years. If I'm not mistaken, Kabir was the highest budget film made up to that point.
Yes. Um, I have two fun facts for this film because I've decided to not go about all my complaints for this film because they will be here forever if I complain about this film.
You can get the main ones though.
My real complaint was I felt the plot dragged on.
Oh God, yeah. No, this film. Okay, you can tell this is an early feature film because it did not need to be a feature film. This film could have you could have cut this in half.
Yes. Um, Fun fact: the person that played McKeast, I guess that's how I pronounce it. Or rather, the real actor's name is Bartmalo Pagino. Would blow up from this film, and they would become a banger. They would be a big star, and they would star in multiple spin-offs of this film. Excuse me, of this film. This film was also the first ever to use a dolly track system. Fun fact about that.
I did notice the cinematography is a lot better than most films because, as you know, the cinematography in most of these movies is the bare fucking minimum. It is just long, still shots from one angle.
It's a lot of very interesting things here. Is There's a lot of debate involving this film and the birth of a nation.
Yeah, because so I want to get into this story because this is a weird story. So in the next year, I believe, right?
Yeah.
No, yes, in next year, in 1915, we see Birth of a Nation come out, and D.W. Griffith claims that he invented the feature film, which, as we have seen, is completely false. Even if we even if we disregard Cabiria, there
Yeah.
are other like La Inferno. There's other films that came out before Birth of a Nation that are feature length. He claims that it was feature length. My reasoning as to why he may think that either he didn't know about Cabiria, which is possible, or in my opinion, he we'll see. Birth of a Nation is 3 hours long. There is a possibility that D.W. Griffith believed that if your film was not 3 hours, it probably wasn't feature length to him, which is absolutely wild, but I can totally see a pretentious director like Griffith believing.
Speaking of that debate, so as I actually told you, before we started this, is Birth of a Nation was considered the first film to be feature length film to be shown at the White House, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
But there's a debate for that because this film, Cabiria, would also be shown there prior to Birth of a Nation, and it all depends on on who you side with, on if this is a feature length film or not.
I would 100% say Cabiria is a feature length film. It is 2 hours. It is plenty long enough.
Yeah, so then we both know that Cabiria will be technically the first ever, but people, for some reason, people don't think it was.
And
It's
let's be clear,
silly.
this isn't a massive win for diversity because this film does feature blackface.
Yes. Fun fact: Martin Scorsese. Yes, he's involved here. He um he
He's a
said
vampire?
he said that Pastrone invented the epic movie and deserves credit for many of the innovations often attributed to D.W. Griffith. And Cecil B. and D. Millier? Don't know how to pronounce that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to agree with Scorsese on, I can't say his fucking name. Um, I would agree with him on that because honestly, I think that Cabiria is frankly a better film. And it is the first, no matter how you look at it. I think if you look at it with any reasonable perspective, this is the first feature length film. This is the first of the Italian epics, which aren't going to last very long because of a certain war that we keep talking about. Uh, but it's going to keep. I think I think a lot of credit has been given to Griffith, where frankly, I don't believe it's deserved. He is an influential director and he is very important. And I'm not just saying that because he was a horrible bigot. Because let's be honest, this is 1913. Everyone's a horrible bigot.
Oh boy, you're gonna see me rant a whole lot around a certain other world war.
Oh, yeah. Uh, this, I think, yeah, you're right. The plot of Cabiria does drag on quite a bit. It is a little much at times, though I do think it's entertaining, especially the scene with what's on the poster, the weird baby sacrifice, is a very entertaining scene. Not because they're sacrificing a baby, I do want to clarify that. I am not pro baby sacrifice. And another viewer just tuned in as I say that. Hello.
That's fucking hilarious. So, my ranking for this film is because I do appreciate how good it was, even though it dragged on. It is a solid 8.
I give it a 7. I do think this is. I think my ratings might be a little inconsistent. I might have to go back and redo them, but I do think this film is in a class of above a lot of the other films we're talking about. I think even man, it is crazy. I just want a very tiny side thing. It is crazy to think about. It film has only been around for what 30 something years at this point.
Give or take, yeah.
It is crazy to see how far we've come in only 30 years, right? We've gone from a 2-second clip of a guy walking in a circle, and I'm sure I'm going to repeat this every couple decades that we go through. But we've gone from that to a feature length film with a plot and title cards, and we're in proper silent films now. And it's crazy to think that we're already within what 4 episodes, 3 or 4 episodes,
Mm-hmm.
or this is our third episode.
This is a third.
Yeah, that we've already gotten to a point where we're seeing directors fade into obscurity, like with Méliès, and we're seeing the next generation come into fruition. And I think a really important point on that note, the reason I bring it up, is because we're going to see a lot that people don't fade gradually. There is very much in Hollywood and in entertainment waves of people that come in and out, right? We're
Yeah.
by 1914, the Méliès, the Lumiere brothers, they're nobodies, right? We're seeing Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith. We're seeing the new wave come in within 2 or 3 years.
One thing that it actually gets me thinking on the next quote unquote wave, because
Mm,
in the next 50 years, a lot of the big name directors we know now are gonna be dead. All of them, all big names we
pretty
know
much,
now,
yeah.
gone. So it's me thinking, like, how will films be in the next 50 years? It's such a fun thing to think about because even the actors who are all big now will be either really old or really dead.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the reason I took this journey was to understand where we're at, because I think personally, the study of history is the study of how we got here. I said it in the first episode. Every moment leads to the next, and everything that happened in the 1910s, in one way or another, has resulted in the current environment we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think films, because these are such historic films that we're talking about, really influence where we were and where we are right now. And that brings us, actually, we did a rating for Cabiria.
Yep.
I think this brings us to. We could talk about some comedies, but I think we should just get this over with.
Let's just hop into it. Let's rip it off. Birth of a Nation.
Yep, this is the first blockbuster, one of the first anti war movies, technically. It is a Civil War period piece. Please don't ban me, Twitch, from the perspective of the KKK.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is a 3-hour epic, and I use that in the most technical terms I can. Now, let's get on. Let's start with the good. The cinematography and editing is on a level that we have not seen up to this point. This is a film, technically speaking, that is in a league above its own. We're seeing prosthetics that are very advanced for 1915, right? The Lincoln, the Abraham Lincoln that they use at the beginning of the film, is shockingly quite good. It is also wild to think about. This was in my notes. This is a film that isn't. This isn't like this is a period film, obviously, But this isn't a period that has long been forgotten. There are still Civil War veterans at this time.
Yep.
And that is wild to think about, that there are still people who, when watching this film, going, yeah, I remember that. I remember this happening. I wasn't there, but I remember it. And that is craziness. I I don't. I guess I'll give you the floor on your thoughts, because I feel like your opinion is a little bit more valuable than mine on this film.
So I'm half black, just to put that out there. Um,
Which means
so
Griffith would have hated you.
it's okay because what the fuck this bitch. That's what I want to say about that. But
Yeah, uh, valid.
just anything involving the clan always because it's a very weird situation for me because half white, half black. I'm always just standing here like, huh, how should I feel about this? And this film just tells me that I should really hate this person. I should hate everything they're all about. But I just okay, don't get this wrong. I just can't because they're dead. You can't. I don't hate the dead. I don't care about the damn dead. They're irrelevant to me for the most part. Um,
Everything they've done has been done. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
can't hate Griffith because, as well, it's important to acknowledge he came from a very different time.
yeah. Hence why I can't really hate it at all. Really, well, I can hate it. I can hate the context of it, but I can't really hate the action because everybody was doing it. It's like people in the '90s. They were all going a little wild. I can't really hate on that. um, so what I'll say is the film itself, it had an interesting message. I'll give it that. They would kind of go for it,
You
right?
could certainly call that message interesting.
Yeah, and I like the shots. The shots were cool. It's just a matter of the subject matter was very. If you're fully black, it's very like, wow, I'm gonna turn this off.
Yeah, no, this was like, again, I'm white. I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm not going to be weird about it. This film was uncomfortable. Like, I don't have a racist bone in my body. I'm pretty sure. Oh boy, this was rough. And I
So
had to rewatch it for this, and oh, oh,
in my notes, the only line I have, and this is I'll say this out loud for all you to hear. Racisms. That is all.
and it's so hard to talk about, because if it was just, I've watched some racist movies that are decent outside of the racism. Gone with the Wind is a great example. That movie is racist, but it's not like a bad movie. It's just something you kind of have to acknowledge and get past.
It's
Birth of a Nation doesn't have that, right? The movie is racism.
yeah.
There's nothing outside of it.
It's one of those things where for this movie not the case, but for other things like music, for example, or even art itself, is that you can separate the artist from the art itself. For example, if I showed you a certain painting by a certain mustache man, you wouldn't care about it until I told you who made it. By the way, like, well,
Yeah,
it's pretty good painting, and like, I'm gonna shut my mouth then. Um, so it's a matter of can you separate it from it, but then you have a film that's all about it. You can't really separate it from it because it's what the whole subject is.
yeah, no, it's like, right, there's a difference between a movie made by a bigot and a movie made by a bigot about being a bigot. And I think that makes it really hard to enjoy. As well, I tend to rate films less so about how much I agree with the message and more so how well the message was delivered. And in my opinion, some film people are going to get mad at me for this. The message was not very well delivered, right? It goes in with the assumption that you are already racist. It goes in with
Yes.
the assumption that you're already a bigot. So if you are not a bigot, which I'm sure in the 1910s there weren't many people who weren't in some capacity, but for us in our modern day, I'd like to imagine the majority of the population are at the very most mildly bigoted.
Yes.
So,
This
so I
film.
think that kind of leads into, in that way, it's not very persuasive because you're assuming your audience is already on your side.
Yeah. Um, I do have three fun facts for this film.
I hope they're fun and not too tragic.
So the first fun fact is well, we've talked about this already with Cabiria, is that this film was debatably the first film to ever be shown at the, as you mind you, a feature-length film shown at the White House. That's up for debate. as we were established.
Yeah.
The other fun fact here is about President Woodrow Wilson, who is rumored, famously, to have responded to the film with the remark, and I quote, "It's like writing history with lightning. And my only regret is that it is also terribly true."
Oh, ooh,
Yes.
ooh, that's rough.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you ever look at any like historical thing about Woodrow Wilson or like any website or any memorial about him, they always mention this and they always be like, well, actually, no one actually confirmed that he said this
Yes. Um,
immediately because this is a bad look.
yeah. The other thing is in the opening credits, you might notice is it's a very interesting one. Is a plea for the art of motion picture. We do not fear censorship, for we have no wish to offend with the improprieties or obscenities, but we do demand as a right the liberty to show the dark side of wrong, and that we may eliminate the bright side of virtue, the same liberty that is conceded to the art of the written word, that art to which we owe the Bible and the works of Shakespeare.
Can I just say, okay, the Bible, I get it's the 1910s. Shakespeare? That's who you're gonna go with?
Yeah.
Like, that feels like a really random pick. Like, here's my incredibly offensive movie. By the way, Shakespeare probably agrees with me, and also God. I don't feel like these are on the same level. That's kind of my my thoughts on that.
We do have two alternate versions of this film. Also, I guess something to mention is so in 1921 and 1927, both of them are edited, and they were released to reflect the current political views of both those times. Which I don't know how much changed between 6 years between the two times, but hey, whatever.
I I feel like this is one of those movies. We're probably going to bring it up quite a bit as we go through the series. This is a film, and I mentioned it before we recorded. This for anyone who's watching is like, oh, I'm. It's going to be suffering getting through a lot of these really offensive old movies. As far as I know, and as far as I've seen, for our big pictures that we're going to be talking about on this show, this is as bad as it gets. This is the worst. There are films that get close, but in my opinion, nothing reaches this level of bigotry. And luckily, this this film was so bad that even people at the time were sometimes some groups like, progressive groups who were trying to get people to vote were like, "Hey, um no, there were groups at the time who were violently against this film. There were calls for censorship, which is probably what that opening title is about, and there were people who condemned it. Obviously, a lot of people liked it, but even to this time, this was a lot. Which you can imagine, society tends, not always, to get more progressive as it goes on. And you can imagine, even within those 6 years, this is unacceptable. This is too much.
Yeah.
You'll see in Hollywood, right? They'll be subtly racist just to appeal to the masses, but they will never reach this level of insanity. This film, I know we keep harping on it, but again, this is all this is. This film isn't just bigoted. It is insane. It is like what you imagine old Hollywood to be like. It goes crazy. There's a whole plot line about a politician trying to get black people to vote, I think, or something. And the reason he is because he's like sleeping with a mistress who's mixed. And like, oh my god, cool it.
All right. I think it's enough of Birth of a Nation. We'll be back for
Yeah,
it.
no. Yeah. My rating, I gave this film a 2.
I will give it Jesus Christ 3.5.
That's fair. It had some I found it too much. Let's talk about something a lot more lighthearted. Charlie Chaplin.
Yay.
Um let's talk about his first ever film, Making a Living. Funny thing about this film, he doesn't actually play the tramp. He plays like a snooty rich guy.
Ooh.
I believe this is the film where he plays like a snooty rich guy. There's a couple comedies. They all kind of follow very similar plot lines, very similar threads, I should say. They're little comedies. They're silly. If you watch any of them, they're all pretty much very similar. There's another one released in the same year called His Prehistoric Past, where Charlie Chaplin plays a caveman.
Okay.
It's These comedies are mostly inoffensive, and I mean that in both ways. They're kind of milquetoast. They're there. What do you have you seen any of these early Chaplin comedies?
So this is one of the ones I didn't get to watch, remember? But
Yeah,
I do have a
yeah.
fun fact. This is one of the few times where you'll see our boy Chappie here actually have a named character. This is the one of the few only times you'll see that happen. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so the character's name is Edgar English, but most characters that he plays are either just a tramp or be nameless. But in some occasions, you'll see them be named Charlie. But outside of that, this is the only one we really know.
It does bring up an interesting thing we'll see a little bit is that comedians of this time don't play characters. They kind of just play their comedy persona.
Mm-hmm.
So Chaplin, great example, pretty much in a year or two is always going to be playing the tramp. And there are going to be almost no exceptions to this. And it creates an interesting dynamic where you're not it's like that joke they always tell that like Dwayne the Rock Johnson doesn't play characters, he's always just the Rock.
True.
And there's a lot of actors like that nowadays, but back then it was so much more of those character actors.
I kind of prefer the old way.
I can understand that. I can also understand why it would be very restricting for an actor to be always stuck in one role.
Yeah, I can see why that would be the case. Mm,
It also means that actors kind of have to stick with something in this time. So, like, let's say it's unlikely, but let's say Chaplin actually was way better at serious roles. He would never get a chance to play them because he has to be the tramp.
although I think if one is a truly good actor, a truly good actor, a truly good comedian, is that the ones we see nowadays is that on the spot they can change on a dime.
Mhm.
And they don't really care what back then. Of course, you probably care more than you do now. They don't care who the damn director has to say. I will do as I do. And I've seen plenty of actors who were like, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to play a serious character. Nah, but I'll be something else. Sorry, I'll be
Yeah.
something fucking funny instead."
The point you brought up is actually really interesting because the way films are made in this time is almost the way indie films are made. It's very guerrilla. So, the way Charlie Chaplin would make his films is yes, he was just an actor, but he also kind of did some directing too.
Yeah.
A lot of these early films are like 5 or 6 people who are all making them, and they're all essentially just cooperating to make these movies. They have a studio, or they work for a studio, or studios are starting to form. Either way, they are giving them money and basically just telling them, make a movie, make something people like, right?
Yeah.
and and then Charlie Chaplin makes one, and it makes money, and then he just gets thrown more money to make whatever he wants, really. Because we're going to see it very soon, we haven't seen any of those massive flop failures. So Hollywood, or the studios, which are burgeoning, are just kind of throwing money at people. Uh,
Mm.
I'm not going to give these ratings because they're all very short and all very nothing.
Yeah.
But the next thing we get to talk about is La Vampires, or Les Vampires.
Okay, so this film is, you know what, I'm gonna say it. This is the first film to ever be truly clickbait. Yeah, this is the actual true clickbait. This started, everybody.
Yeah, so this was the plot is about it's essentially a crime drama about a guy trying to track down a gang who calls themselves the Vampires, but they are not vampires.
Which is so ass. It's such clickbait. Hate
Ticket bait, if you will.
that.
I quite liked the Vampires because it had this very morbid style to it, and I found that really interesting. It also was actually quite compelling. Though I do feel like a lot of the episodes, because this is a serial, dragged on way longer than they needed to.
So I am a very biased boy outside of that damn thing. The thing that really sold it to me was Irma Vep, who was a bad bitch of her time.
I I think we have her as one of the posters, and yeah, whoo.
Yeah. So she
I
is unique
yeah.
in another sense. She's very unique in the sense that unlike other actors, and even she even outdoes some modern actors as well, is that she did her own damn stunts. She did all of them.
What what's that one scene? I believe it's in the second episode, or maybe the third one, where she's in the latex bat suit with the
Yeah.
heels, and she's like doing acrobatics and things. It's like, oh my god. Firstly, hot damn. Secondly, oh my goodness, did you injure yourself?
One thing that's very cool and very interesting is that while most people today don't really know who the hell she is, she was honored. I believe it was like very recently. It was like last 2 years. As a own miniseries based on her.
Just on her as a person, I assume not on her character.
Her as a person,
Wow,
which is
interesting.
it's so cool. But this like lesser known like banger. That's what she was. Lesser known banger. It's got her own damn thing, man. It's so cool.
That kind of brings me to an idea that I've been thinking about recently, which is this is the best time in human history to be into old media because frankly, everything before 1929 in a couple months, or sorry, 1920, and everything from 1929 in a couple months is going to be public domain. As well, there's streaming, which lets you watch old movies. Imagine trying to do this film journey that we're doing before the internet. It would be nearly impossible.
Very true.
Not to mention a lot of these films were considered lost at that time. I I am so glad that a lot of these old actors, even if it's very niche communities and things like people like me and you, uh, I'm glad that they're starting to get some recognition. Like we said, a lot of people are starting to discover that Cabiria was probably one of the first feature length films, or La Inferno.
Yeah. A
And
very
Mhm.
sorry. It is
No,
like this is back to the actress real quick. Is that so she died on her 68th birthday, but if she just lived one more year, she would have so she was in 69 base 69 films. So one thing people don't know is that she was also a director and she was a writer, which she directed 4 movies and she wrote 4 herself.
being a woman director in that time must have been difficult to say the least. So I can respect that a lot.
Yes. It's such a weird thing to be. You know what? You know what? Note it down. We have to start covering the like some of the top actors and directors. We had to do it. It's
Yeah, I we've kind of been doing it with Millier and Griffith, but they're they're starting to make things. We're starting to get to that point where we're getting celebrities, which is another big thing as we get into 1916. Is that we're getting the first real celebrities. Obviously, the first ones that we are talking about is Charlie Chaplin, and another one, which is one of Griffith's pretty much staple actresses, Lillian Gish, who I was convinced was like 14, but it turns out she was 19 when she made her first movie. She just looks like she's a child.
oh, sorry, that's fucking funny.
No, like seriously, if you look up pictures of Lillian Gish, even when she's like 50, she looks like she's 20.
That's some good genetics right there. That's what I was saying
I
about
know,
that.
especially for the 1910s, where everyone was starting to smoke and drink and absolutely destroy their bodies at any given opportunity. Um, but yeah, she's one of the big actresses of this time because she has this very doll-like appearance, and that is very useful for silent film. She also was very expressive, and
Ooh.
frankly, was just a really good actress, and is honestly from this period one of my favorite actors. She is phenomenal in a lot of her roles, and we're going to be talking. I think she does appear in this next film. Intolerance. This was a 180 from Birth of a Nation. This is Griffith's follow-up to Birth of a Nation.
Okay, I have comments on this film as well. I have comments.
I should try to explain the plot because the plot is extremely convoluted. So this is a film about people being intolerant in multiple different ways and takes place over what, four time periods? Is that
Yes,
correct?
four.
Yeah. So it's Babylon, the modern day, or the then modern day, uh like the Victorian, I believe. And I
Yeah.
don't remember what the fourth one was.
Jesus Christ, Lillian Gish.
Yeah.
She lived to like she was almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
Jesus fuck.
Yeah. What was the fourth period? I do not remember. One second. It's
Uh,
hard because this film is one moment. Yeah, 3 hours again.
Babylon. We already said that one. Jesus, they don't really give us the storyline well here.
I would assume it's a pretty hard film to comprehend.
Yeah.
So here we go. Babylon. Oh, it's set in 27 AD in the Bible.
Oh.
That would be why. So there's the Renaissance and then the modern period. And these are all stories about intolerance. And they keep cutting between the four different storylines, which is probably why the film is 3 hours long, because they are essentially telling four stories all at once that kind of intertwine. And I say intertwine very loosely. I This film is what I would describe as a beautiful mess. It's so hard to follow, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What did you think of Intolerance?
So in my notes, I said this movie was honestly overwhelming. It's long. The storytelling was interesting, but uh, man, it was just a whole lot, and it was getting very tiresome as it was going on. I'll say that.
I can 100% agree with that. I think the film is. Oh fuck! I forgot to list vampires. I gave it an 8. What did you give the vampires?
Honestly, six.
That's fair. Now that I've actually gotten that written down, we can move on to the next one. We can actually move on to intolerances. Yeah, it was too much. It was a lot, and I think a part of that is because they decided to do so much. I think Griffith was trying to top himself here. Not only that, already saying it again, this was the biggest budget film up to that point.
So
Uh, and this film flopped hard.
it's tough.
Mhm.
What I will say is I do have a fun fact because it's the dumbest but funniest fun fact ever. Because well, in the context, it's horrible to laugh at, but they're all dead now, so ha 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 ha. So during the filming of the battle sequence, many of the extras got so into character that they caused real life injury to one another. At the end of the shooting of that day, a total of 60 injuries were treated.
So this is that thing that I mentioned last episode that old Hollywood was crazy. The reason I say that is because people just got injured constantly, and for some reason, everyone's response was, "Okay, yeah, this movie has the Babylon sequences specifically are huge. I think there's like hundreds of extras in it, easily."
Oh, sorry, we missed the message about like almost 10 minutes ago.
Uh,
Um, Clickbait. That's how I felt when we watched The Vampires of Bikini Beach. That movie was so bad. By
yes, Kizzy, that is my significant other. We watch B movies, and we watched just a little side tangent. We watched a movie called Vampires of Bikini Beach, and it is mostly a boring B movie about people having a slight spat. I think I reviewed that on my Letterboxd, which actually you can put that in the chat if you'd like. I have a
Yeah.
Letterboxd. Yes, I'm a film bro. I try not to be.
I have to remember
But if you
to.
ever want to see where, if you ever want to read my reviews because you're crazy and you want to do that for some reason, all the movies that I watch in preparation for this series are going to be on my Letterboxd, and you will get to see perhaps some future episodes and what I already think about certain films. So if that's something that interests you, there it is. Thank you, Scyther.
Mm-hmm.
back to Intolerance. I have very little to say about this film because it was so difficult to keep up with.
This is a film that I think if it was more consistent in its storytelling, that I would have had a way better time, and it would have been a way better movie. I feel like they had a really good idea going on here, and a really good message. They got lost in the sauce, and that's a problem with a lot of movies that from what I understand we'll be seeing soon enough.
Yes, the idea is amazing, like you said. It's just the execution that I find incredibly lacking.
Yeah,
I think there was some potential here, and I feel like a lot of it was squandered, which is a real shame because obviously a film like this is never going to get made again. This was a film that really existed in its time period. And I find that kind of sad because I would have loved to seen a 20s remake of this.
which is sad. The only thing I can really think of so that's kind of similar, but not really, because they all take place at least in the same time period. It's a movie called Dark Ashes, where this quick little side thing here is that it tells the story of various people and their background of how they are all doing sins. So it covers the seven deadly sins, more or less. Um, and it'll be through cheating, through being greedy, envious, this, that, and the third. And it feels similar to this to a degree. Of course, not entirely, obviously. There's some intolerance
Yeah,
going on there, but nowhere near like this.
yeah, no, I can see that. Uh, oh, this is gonna be hard. What did you give Intolerance?
Just because it did so horribly but consistent. It's a. I'm also being nice still. Five.
Really, you thought it was like you didn't like it very much then.
Yeah, because for me, I like stories. If it's not consistent, I don't like it enough to keep it going.
I've been giving a lot of sevens and eights for this episode. I think it's hard to rate films from this period. Um, yeah, I think I think that's a fair rating. I gave it an 8 just because of the spectacle of it all. That Babylon, all the Babylon scenes are crazy. Also, weird fun fact about this film, um, because it's old Hollywood, and of course, this film features basically nudity. The Babylonian, I don't know, what are concubines? That's their name. They have these frilly little see-through dresses. Um, and I just thought that'd be an interesting thing to note because in the next coming years, we're going to see film get very risky and then get very conservative.
Something that I always wondered if there's like some bloopers, like in is the scene like let's imagine this is that okay, you're filming your movie out of nowhere, you see a bunch of actors from another movie, it's like, oh shit, hey, my bad, you see some aliens just walk into your damn Victorian period movie by mistake.
I mentioned early Hollywood, something like that could happen all the time. Yeah.
It's
Um,
hilarious.
yeah, I that would be that would be funny. I wonder if any of that's preserved because that bloopers are very almost never preserved from the spirits. These films are barely preserved.
Ah, the next one is a favorite of mine just because of what it covers. Uh, Unix.
Yes, I didn't really watch this one, and if I did, I do not remember it. So you're gonna have to talk a little bit more about this one.
So give me one second because I have a whole thing here for Judix. So Judix, which would also see a remake in 1963, by the way, very important to note that
Mm.
down. So it was released in 1916 as a 12-part serial following the adventures of a mass vigilante named Judix as he would fight against criminals led by the corrupt banker. I can't pronounce it, so I'm gonna pronounce it like that. So this film is really great. It is debatably the first film ever to have a superhero as its protagonist. Um, Notably, it would also inspire Batman and the Shadow, which is I'm like, wow, this shitty movie from fucking 1960 would inspire the Batman. Bet. We would also see our girl Irma pop back up, look like a bad bitch again. So
I believe this is another serial, or no? Is it a
yes,
new serial?
it is a serial. So
Okay.
the overall plot line is nothing special. It was actually, at least from a comic person's perspective, it was boring. But it was the first, so I can't hate on the first. I gotta
That is
appreciate
fair.
it.
It is hard to hate on something that literally invented what would come after it.
Yeah. So the plot line here is that, the banker, the banker would sign a thing to replace some victims and all that crap. It's a very basic plot line, and he has to go around and defeat him. It's nothing special. I hate dogging on something that stuff can first, but it's really not special. It's really dumb actually. In fact, it involves kidnapping, blackmail, the whole razoo.
Yeah,
But
it seems pretty. I don't want to say generic because it's hard to call anything generic in the period with such little content, but you know.
yeah, so the banker would also be eventually blackmailed and all that other fun stuff against by some other criminals. It's a whole fun thing, but this is a little fun fact is that the story of this would also be published in Le Petit Portion that would actually coincide with the release of each chapter of the story.
Okay.
Yes, to dive in more as to why I connects back into Shadow and Batman, and this is just for my notes. I wrote down some fun facts from our old boys over at IMDb. It's a little bit, just a little bit. I don't really care for that site too much. After they banned me, I'm probably gonna say, why would they ban you? I can't tell you that. I'll get in trouble with Twitch.
I can make assumptions. I can make assumptions.
So the French writer Louis Philippe found his niche when he was creating serials. When he essentially brought to the screen two of his most popular movies, Phantomosa and Les Vampires. Les Vampires. So, the Vampire
Love
Louis,
vampires.
yeah, we went over it. Some good newer critics, though, howled at his two productions and complained that his so-called heroes were in fact criminals committing evil acts. Well, they were. Come on now, they literally were.
Is this the superhero argument like 50 or 20 years before the superhero argument?
Yes. He would take the harsh critics' stuff personally and set out towards a different path in his next serial. The release of the 12-part serials, Judix, beginning on December 1916, set the tone for a new hero in movies. Partly based on the main character in Alexander, Andre Dumas, in 1844 novel The Count of Monte Cristo. Oh my God, really?
Monte Cristo?
Yeah, really? Wow. So
Oh,
so Judix means judge. If you're curious,
that
um,
makes sense.
yeah. So the 1930 radio show character the Shadow in 1939 and introduction of Batman in the comics have direct linkage to Judix, making the French serial the first movie linked to a superhero as its main character. In fact, the French comic book Hurrah published a series in 1940 based on Judix, which was simply a French translation of the American comic strip, The Shadow. So, yeah.
So I did not realize this was the inspiration for a lot of superheroes. Fair enough.
So one could say that the Judix would inspire the well, not only superheroes itself, but also the archetype of the. I guess you could say what our boy Deadpool is. He's kind of a whole rogue, the anti-hero kind of. Because that's kind of what Judix kind of was to me, at least.
That makes sense. I'm just looking at some descriptions. It definitely seems like that. That's really interesting. You seem to like it. What would you give it?
This will be a very rare thing for me because I won't be doing this very often with any film. Really, a 10.
This is your first 10?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, we got our first 10. I don't think my first 10 comes around until 1924.
This is just purely because I'm a complete nerd for comics.
That is fair. I'll have to watch Judex now. I have to. I owe it to myself. We got some more comedies. We have, I believe, three from Chaplin. We have The Immigrant, A Dog's Life, and Shoulder Arms. The Immigrant and A Dog's Life are not especially interesting. They're just comedies about a poor guy and an immigrant, respectively. Uh, However, Shoulder Arms is a comedy about World War One, which is in full swing at this point and is in its last year.
Oh boy.
Now, I have seen this. I'm starting to actually, I've actually seen it. Somehow Charlie Chaplin manages to make World War One funny, which is, I don't think, a feat anyone else has ever accomplished. Because inherently World War One is tragic. Any war is really tragic, except for the Emu War.
Also
So
the
I
pig
don't.
war.
Yes, that is. So I never really thought it could be funny, but he handles it well enough for a 1910s film. Um, though we do see our first appearance of one of my favorite comedians from the silent era. We see in, I believe, the Goodnight Nurse and the Bellboy. We see, well, first we see Fatty Arbuckle, but more importantly, we see Buster Keaton in one of his first roles.
Ooh.
I love Buster Keaton. I love the physical comedy he made. One is possibly the first action film,
Okay.
and it is he even in this first film is showing off that he is a stuntman above everything else. And I quite like them, but again, they're short. They're basically just shorts. I'm not too worried about giving them a rating.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I actually
that
got to watch Shoulder Arms. It was one of the few Chaplin ones I actually got to watch.
yes,
Was so old Chappie. I just like to watch him struggle. It was very funny watching him struggle to adapt. I like that a lot.
yeah, it is funny seeing a character who is even depicted as not a soldier play a soldier.
So what's our next film? But Sinking of Lusitania.
Yes, they a bunch of films came out in 1918. We can talk about the sinking of the Lusitania. This is a weird one historically.
True. So this film, first and foremost, the animation was chef's fucking kiss.
It
It
is really impressive.
it outdoes
And
it.
remember, cell shading doesn't exist, or cell animation doesn't exist yet. So the person who's animating this is drawing every part of every frame by frame.
Yeah, this film, in my opinion, outdoes Disney and a lot of early Disney stuff. Very, like a lot by far.
To be fair, early Disney is rough.
Very true. Um, so I do have a fun fact for this film. As First Lord of Almondry, Almer, good lord, I cannot word today. I need water.
Yeah, this film is about the sinking of a ship. Originally, I believe you can correct me. The person who commissioned it essentially wanted the artist to make an anti-America joining World War One film, but because this was such a tragic event, it kind of ended up becoming the opposite.
Yeah. So the fun fact was the First Lord of the Almondry, I don't care if I said it wrong, Winston Churchill allowed civilian ships to transport munitions for the Western Front. He prevented German U-boats from searching the ships by illegally arming merchant ships, introducing the Q ships with concealed deck guns, and by ordering merchant captains to invade submarines that surface. This would also lead to sinking Lusitania because Germans, by peeps, thought this was a game Q ship.
And I assume the tragedy comes from the fact that it wasn't. It was just an
Yeah.
unarmed ship.
Yep, and in defense of the Germans, yep, I had to do it because I'm biased. Duh. The Americans were looking very shady by the standpoint, so I'm not surprised they attacked the ship.
Though that did not spell well for Germany, as it caused I believe it caused the U.S. to join World War One.
It would, but how much America helped is really up for debate by most, I guess.
I mean, true, but if the war wasn't hopeless by this point, it was definitely hopeless by the time the U.S. joined.
Ah, it wouldn't help with the Mexicans. It wouldn't help at all. A certain little telegram.
Indeed. Yeah, this was actually as an animation. You wouldn't expect it again from animation, but it was really powerful.
It was. It was
It was
really good.
it is really tragic, even in animation form, to see this ship sinking. Ships sinking in the middle of the ocean have always been a tragic thing. We've always, I think, as a species, been affected by such things. Hence, why Titanic essentially scarred a generation.
Yep. So how I'll rank this movie, this will not be a 10 because, like I said, it's very rare for me to give this out. This will be a 9.3.
Okay, fair enough.
Very odd ranking,
Uh,
but that's how I ranked it.
I originally rated it a 7, but after rewatching it before this episode, I think giving it a 9 is pretty apt.
Mm-hmm.
The next film is going to be a little difficult to talk about because it is an anti-racism film that is racist. Time for Broken Blossoms. I mean, it is. It is an anti-racism film that is incredibly racist.
It is, but your boy came with fun facts, and I got so many fun facts.
So the plot of this film, very quickly, is it's about a young couple, one of which is white and the other is Asian, Chinese specifically, um, being being oppressed, and especially by the woman's father, who is depicted as a abusive, drunken boxer. And I have waited for the chance to say this. He is by definition a palooka. So that's the basic rundown. It's
So
hard to talk about this film without mentioning the guy who plays the Chinese man is very white.
I'm very nitpicky because of a pure historical sense here. Um, so our boy Cheng Huan is a missionary whose goal is to bring the teachings of peace about from Buddha to his Anglo-Saxons, the whiteys in this case. Um, my immediate issue is that he would never fall in love with this woman because he's a missionary, and as far as I understand, the missionaries from the old Buddha faith can't engage in intercourse or any of that. It's stupid.
That is fair. I do think I do think there's a part of the plot where they discuss that he's conflicted about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in the book that this is based on, which I cannot say the title to, or else every platform will immediately ban me. Understandably. Uh, I believe they discuss that a little bit more, though. Who knows?
Yeah. Um, the fun fact I can give you here, because it's a very, very interesting fun fact, is that our boy DW, or rather, excuse me, this will be the first film ever released by United Artists. Did you know that?
Yes, we can talk about United Artists. So
Um,
early Hollywood was terrible. We can agree on that.
yep.
And Charlie Chaplin, Lillian Gish, D.W. Griffith, and one other person. I do not remember who it was. Was it Keaton?
I
I
believe
don't think it
so.
was Keaton. Yeah, might have been. They all formed a studio together, focusing on empowering artists and being less greedy, which is, a very admirable goal for a studio. Unfortunately, they picked the worst people to do all of it because we have a director that in 10 years no one's going to care about, a man who will not be able to adapt to the oncoming silent or sound revolution, and that's going to be a problem, a fading actress, and another comedian that's eventually going to go to a different studio.
So, do you know why this is the first ever film published by them?
I do not.
So, our boy DW got into an argument with Adolf Zucker. They got into an
I thought
argument.
you were going to say someone else for a second.
No. Adolf Zucker uh, had his own company called the Artcraft Company, which was a subsidiary of the Paramount Pictures. But you see, Zucker was outraged. He was pissed off. How dare you deliver me this crap film? Um, Everybody in his picture dies, he said. Griffith, who was pissed off, left the office and came back the very next day with $250,000 in hard cash. He threw that shit on his desk and said, "Here, now give me the rights to the fucking film." And he did that. And that's how it would see an artist have this film.
By the way, that's 250K in 1910s money. Griffith was loaded. God, that's a lot of money.
Yep.
Oh my god. So, yes. As for the film itself, it is hard to get past the weird decision to not cast an Asian person, but I understand it was the 1910s, and even if Griffith wanted to, which I don't know if he did, he probably couldn't have gotten away with it.
Probably not.
Uh, but what I do find like about this film is the plot. This is one of the first films that I've watched in my journey that I actually got really engaged with. I tried to watch Birth of a Nation and I tried to get into Intolerance, but this was the first film where I actually got invested in the story.
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off here. So there's a reason why he couldn't include a Chinese person.
Oh?
The Chinese Exclusion Act.
Oh, yeah. So maybe it wasn't entirely up to Griffith.
Yeah, so Congress would appeal that act by 1943. So it was still well in effect by the time of this film.
I see. Oh, 43. Oh my god, it took 30 years?
So it first started in 1892.
It took 50 years?
Yes. So the act was actually made permanent in 1902, but then it would be excluded, not excluded, but repealed later.
Oh my goodness. That would
Yes.
explain the lack of Asian representation.
So it's actually thing I would actually go on about. Like I would rant about it sometimes because it was like actually one of the first. So we're the only country that I know of off the top of my head has banned an entire group of people. Which is it's both hilarious and sad that we banned. It was all because of damn fucking the it was a gold rush. I believe why it's all really kicked off. No,
Yeah, it's
no,
unfortunate.
yeah, there was a gold rush and I believe something to do with trains. Something to do with trains.
Building the railroads.
Yeah. So you can't really blame DW here. I mean, well, don't forget, I believe like people from China can still come here, but it was like very, very, very limited. Like 105 people at a time each year could come.
Yeah, it's something nuts. And yeah, I can see why that would be an issue. I don't know if Griffith had a change of heart all of a sudden. I would like to think that. I also kind of want to believe that Griffith didn't understand what the story was about.
Yeah. Hmm.
But the plot itself, if you ignore the fact that yeah, there's some yellow face, the plot is actually incredibly progressive. The one white guy in the entire film, pretty much, is the villain. Um, and our missionary is for certain a hero. And the ending of this film, sorry, spoilers for a over 100-year-old film. At the end of the film, unfortunately, the woman dies of her abuse, and the missionary comes in rage. And I bring up this scene because it is so beautiful. He walks in, looks at the guy, right, and
Hmm.
just fires at him. Not one shot. He unloads the entire revolver into him, which I think kind of helps the symbology of how he's feeling.
Yeah. So this is again the dude's not actually Asian or Chinese whatsoever. This is actually something very important and involving like, at least for our country, the United States of America. You will never at any point in American history find an authentic Asian film. You just won't. There has been so many Asians, be you Chinese, Korean, Japanese, whatever you are, whenever Americans try to adapt and actually show off an authentic iteration of their lifestyle and how they are trying to adapt into America, it's always milk toast. It's always horrible, and it's the thing that we'll see. in a like another 40 years or so in this journey is how Americans are just really bad at covering Asians in America. We are horrible at it. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about certainly, and I at least at the very least, if you want to see Asian representation, you can watch films from Asian countries, which
Yep,
luckily are going to become more and more frequent as the years go on, and
indeed.
not just from Japan. All of the countries get something eventually. Maybe other than like Cambodia.
Oh
Uh,
boy, that's a whole topic in itself. Let's not get there.
yeah. What did you think of Broken Blossoms?
I thought honestly it was really good. It was the thing that surprised me the most is that it actually had a remake in 1936 and you didn't watch it.
I will look into it for the 1936 episode. How's that?
Yeah, we gotta look at it and see what like really differences itself from there and then. Oh no, it might be even. Wait, no. It won't be even worse because the Americans and going against Asians again.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be any better with representation though, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the 1936 version called?
Same name. Hold on.
Really, I'm having trouble finding it, but it's probably out there. That's probably why I couldn't
So
find it.
it's a British film this time around.
Oh, that's a poster. Okay, we'll get there when we get there. So yeah,
Oh,
I personally gave it an 8.
you know what? I'm agree here. Yeah, eight.
Yeah, it's a great film. Even if it is a little, yeah, that is the title
That's the
right there.
title of a fucking of a
That's the
story.
book. That's the book. Yes. Anyone who's interested can look up the title. I'm not going to say it here. You can look up what Broken Blossoms is based on. So, we only have two more things to talk about. Which
Lovely.
is a short comedy. I believe it's. Oh yeah, it's a Chaplin gimmick film. It's a bumping into Broadway. I think it's a Chaplin film. Let me check that. It's another Chaplin film. I'm kind of glazing past these because they are not. Oh, this is Harold Lloyd's first film. That's what it is. Harold Lloyd is another one of the big three silent comedians. I quite like Harold Lloyd, though I do think he is certainly the least of the three. Though he is definitely more my style.
Ooh.
We'll see more of him in the 20s. He's he was the second most popular comedian in his time, but is the least popular of the big three nowadays, mostly due to the fact that he refused to license his films for a long time
Ah.
to anyone who didn't pay an exorbitant price. So no one got to see them in any capacity. But now that he's in the public domain, it's not really a problem. So that bumping into Broadway was pretty fun. Now that I actually know which film I'm talking about. The final one that we'll talk about, though, is one that I know you are quite fond of for totally
Yes.
non-biased reasons. The Doll.
So Vidal is a German film, or to be exact, the German Empire. Mm. Mm.
One of the only films to come out of the German Empire, by the way.
It was so fucking good.
It's also isn't this the closing years of the German Empire?
Hold on. Let's see when this film was popping off.
1919.
Yeah, literally. The Weimar will be coming very soon, and we the Germans are not happy.
Yeah, the Weimar period is known for a lot of things. Very few of them good. One of the really good things is that it birthed a German film industry that would immediately collapse. Um,
Yeah. Um.
but I've seen a. I watched a little bit of this film while we were recording just because I hadn't seen it and I really need to. And I see why German film is so well regarded now. I forgot entirely because I hadn't seen a German film in so long. At least the Weimar and Empire film.
So the film is about a dude who is forced into marriage by his uncle.
Yes.
The man decides to fool him by marrying a lifelike mechanical doll instead. who what that mouth do for real, for real. Um,
Truly a man ahead of his time for plot concepts.
Japanese who the Germans were already ahead of their
What's that
time.
movie, Her?
Wait, oh no. Um, so the big thing of this film that really stuck out to me is because it's just pure German comedy. It's you can't get any better than this with Germans in comedy.
Germany is not a country famous for comedy,
This is pure
but
German comedy. You don't understand.
so we all know, most of us would know anyways, that like there's a pretty standard sense of British humor that, or pretty iconic American humor. What would you describe German humor as, at least in
Mm.
this period?
So in this period, it's not how Americans view it today at all. Obviously,
Very dry.
very dry, very. Uh, so hold on. Hold on.
Oh no.
so so there is a German joke which most Americans will say, "What? Two hunters meet, both are dead."
I get the joke. It's because if they see each other, they're gonna think each other's a deer, right?
Kinda. So when we say this, they're both dead because they both killed each other.
Yeah.
Germans are well. This it's very generalization of an entire group of people, but it's fucking true. I don't fucking care. It's why stereotypes exist, by the way. Um, is that they're all very blunt and very dark and very brutal. I mean, just look at their damn mythos. Fucking Krampus, my boy.
I thought that was Russian. I didn't know that
No,
was German.
Krampus is very German.
Fair enough.
um, there are a lot of dark German tales. Most of the damn Disney movies are based off German tales, by the way.
Grimm's fairy tales. Yeah.
Yeah, and uh, it gets very dark very fast. A lot of hands being chopped off, and but this is a bit different. This is when Germany was not it's not really young. Well, it is young because the empire was united, like wasn't united for damn long by this point. Still, um, the humor is a bit different. It's
Mm.
clearly set in its time where it has to be. It's not a cultural thing where you have to. You can tell it's fucking funny, give or take, but it's a matter of if you can understand the culture and it's great. It's even better, but if you don't, it's okay. It'll still be funny.
I would describe like early German media humor, so like 1910s, 1920s, is very satirical. It's
Mm-hmm.
very clearly making fun of very heavily making fun of whatever's going on at the day,
Yep.
which can make it both very dated and very permanent, because a lot of concepts in even in the doll, as we joked about, uh, are still things to this day, right? People not wanting to marry and wishing they could just like make a wife.
Yeah. Which the thing I do like the most is that it's clearly taking a stab at arranged marriages because they're shit.
Yeah,
And
of
they
course. It's the plot is making fun of that, like, oh, you got to get married, and here's who you're gonna get married to because it benefits me.
You know something that's very weird to me? It's so confusing as to why, from what I understand, there's not really any films in America covering it until way later. But arranged marriages were still very much a thing here, like by this point. And a thing that's also still not thought about is the fact by at least the '60s in America, there were grown men marrying 9-year-olds. That was a thing. That was still happening in by the '60s, which is so weird to me that all this progress is happening, and meanwhile, hey, yo, me 9 years old and marry some dude in his '60s.
Ugh. It is crazy to think about how much things have changed and how long things, or how long things stayed the same. Uh, yeah, that is
Yeah,
unfortunate.
it's one of those things that we just fucking like this, like, oh, what are you talking about? Just kicks it out to the corner. I know what you're talking about.
We don't. I mean, I can kind of understand why we don't want to talk about it. It's a very uncomfortable subject.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we have to play keep up with the rest of the world because, mind you, a lot of Western countries were already like, wait, 9 years old? Nah. It's the same thing with slavery. Is a very sensitive topic, but most of Europe was already ditching the shit by the time we're like, should we get rid of it? Nah, cuh. What do you mean civil war? Civil war. Yeah. Meanwhile, rest of Europe, uncivilized brutes.
Okay, there is some caveats to that because yes, okay, technically the UK didn't have slavery, or the sorry British Empire, but they were still colonizing half of the world.
Yeah. It's one of those little superiority things where they're not really superior. I do have a fun fact involving this film.
Mm.
At one point, when Lancelot takes a heart out of the leg of his pants, this is an allusion to the German expression "Das Herz ist mir in die Hose gerutscht." My heart slid into my pants, which is equivalent to to have one's heart in one's boots.
I see.
Very German.
I can assume the meaning of that.
this is uh this is a great film. This is beautiful. This is not me being biased at all. This is the perfect fucking film, and I demand a remake. Germans, get at it.
You know, honestly, I would give this a 9. This is a really good um, comedy for the 1910s, and is a great way to close out our movie segment.
Yup. For me, and this is not being biased at all. It's totally not me just tossing a bone to my people. A 10? No, it's a 9.9.
It's almost the 10. I'd give it a 9. I don't usually divide my ratings, so I'd say it's a 9. It's close to a 10. I think it needs a little bit more for me to enter a league of its own. But now that we've talked about the individual films, this is your first episode where you've given out 10s, so
Yup.
I can tell you're definitely liking these films a lot more.
Yes. The Judix was really damn good, and if I didn't give it a 10, it would have been the damn doll. I will give these
Fair.
out like so. These be very rare, and if ever you'll only see like maybe 110 per every few episodes, maybe two. If I'm feeling like really generous, but this is the one where you'll see. I was very close to being generous, giving out another 10, but no.
I'm very stingy with my 10s. I like I said, I'm in 1939, and I have reviewed about 250 films. I have given out 5 10s total.
Mm.
For me, at least, the 10 is a film in a league of its own. And while this film is really good, I don't think it's in a league of its own quite yet. We will see a German film that I did give a 10 to, though that will be in about a decade from now.
I will say that this
So,
film
mhm.
that perhaps it inspired a genre because we didn't see like anything involving a damn doll or a damn robot until way later. So I think this may have inspired that genre to a degree.
Which is funny considering this is like a weird comedy about a guy not wanting to get married.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. Ooh,
Yeah. What did you think about film in general of the 1910s?
better, just superior to what we've seen already from before.
These are real movies. I think is the way I would describe it. Like everything before this feels like a prototype. These are actual films.
Yes, and the first actual quote unquote films are just better. It's no way to really it's like scrub past it. They're just better.
Yeah, no, this is if anyone were to start this journey and was kind of apprehensive about a lot of these films from the 1890s and the early 1900s, I think this is the period that you could start with because there are, if nothing else, the comedies are easy to watch. Um, Even Shoulder Arms again, which is a comedy about fucking World War I. It's easy to watch.
Very
So
true.
that's what I would say.
So
I liked film from this period. I think it doesn't. It's not as quite good as the. Sorry, not quite as good as the 1920s would get, but it's still worth watching and it's still worth delving into this. But the next thing we have is going to be a little more. We have something a little bit more to talk about, which is music this time.
yay.
Yes, this is the era of the real jazz. We're still getting some ragtime, but jazz is starting to really fall into its own. I've listened to quite a bit of music from this time, uh, and a lot of it is related to World War One because, yeah, there's a lot of war music. I do think the music from this period. I don't know how much you listen to.
Not as much as I would like to.
That's fair. Uh, to be fair, if you've heard a couple songs, you've probably heard most of them. The style is very similar. We're not in an era where each artist is expected to be an individual. Rather, each artist is expected to adopt a style. And it's very prevalent in the 1910s.
Mm.
And a lot of the music is very ragtime, very old timey, very poorly preserved, unfortunately. Though, if you listen to some like proper blues and like I believe there's something called the like the Dixieland Band or something like that from the 1910s. You start to see that like really good jazz start coming into fruition.
Ooh.
That being said, there's still not a ton to talk about.
I do remember, like, one of the first things we talked about when we first met each other a long while ago was that you like the jazz.
Yes, funny story. So when I was a kid, I mostly listened to generic pop music and grunge because that's what my dad listened to. But the first time I played a Fallout game, it completely changed me. I think it was New Vegas. I played New Vegas and I fell in love with what is commonly referred to as oldies music, but specifically jazz. And it became an obsession of mine. I even, over the years, made a playlist that is 24 hours long, just filled with old music from before the 70s. And I thought it was my favorite thing until very recently. Like I would say, I listened almost exclusively to jazz until I was an adult,
Ooh.
and it's still something I love. I still love jazz, and I'm very excited to get to the 20s and 30s and the 40s. But obviously, anyone who knows about swing knows the 50s is where it's at. Because that's where we're going to get into our really big, really famous jazz musicians. But right now, we have a couple artists making jazz, and they are not going to be around for very long because the second wave of music, at least in this sense, is going to hit very soon.
So one thing very important to talk about is, do you want to tell a story about it's hit me because I remembered it happening and you told me about it a long time ago. It's involving Elvis, piracy, and the police.
Yeah, so thank you for just outing me like this, I think. Uh this is a little bit of an embarrassing story. So when I was a child, I was just discovering what piracy was, and I thought it'd be a great idea to get uTorrent and pirate some Elvis music because that's what I was listening to. It is also important to mention that I was living with my grandparents. So I start pirating music, not knowing what I'm doing. And of course, the ISP gets involved because yeah, that's going to look like it. Eventually, my grandfather picks up the phone and begins talking with them. And he says, "I have no idea what's going on. I didn't pirate any Elvis music." Well, I come in and I confess like the little suck up I am. And I remember this conversation very vividly. I was sweating bullets. I was terrified that I was gonna like get in trouble and go to prison because that's what I had been told. Turns out, not really. They'll just tell you to stop doing it. Uh, he told them, no, 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 it was my grandson. And I heard the most doubtful right from the other end. Sure, this like I was like 13. This 13-year-old boy was pirating Elvis music. Sure, but it was true. And they basically let us off saying like, don't do it again. And yeah, I never used uTorrent again because, whoo, yeah, that was terrifying. Uh, yeah. Hey, in a couple decades, I won't even have to worry about it. It'll all be public domain, and it'll all be for nothing. But yeah, that was. Oh man, I was an absolute dingus.
It makes me feel better. I called the cops once and they killed shit up once. It was hilarious. It's a prank call to the cops.
Oh god. Yeah, we've done some stupid things in our lives as most people do. So
I got very lucky because I looked way darker back then, and I was lucky that the cop shit up was a black woman and not a fucking white guy when the first thing.
yeah, oh god. Uh Either way, I think we've how long? Yeah, about an hour, 40 minutes. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about for the 1910s?
The games because I'm sure there's something here. Let's take a gander real
Yes.
fast. Uh,
Also known as that part of the episode where Cursed Curations doesn't actually do much research because this is not an era worth researching that heavily.
yeah, because there's Jack and shit. Let's see. That's not. No, not games set in, but released in
Plus.
1910.
Okay, so I'm looking through them right now. Looked as usual, not a whole lot. Uh,
Ah, you love to see it.
so I can look through this. Yeah, here we go. There's a German one.
Ooh.
Oh, I'm gonna butcher this. Mensch anger dich nicht. It's in English. Man, don't get angry. And I'm sure I butchered that, and I'm not at all sorry. Uh, Wait, is this?
I
One
do.
second, is this what I think it? Oh my goodness! It is. It is basically. You know that game Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry is a ripoff of this.
that's hilarious.
It's basically the same concept. A variant of chess, two variants of chess. Oh my god! What in 1916, Julian S. Grant Hayward introduced the game called Double Chess, and it is exactly what you think it is.
Is it a
It
chess
is
times two?
two chessboards put side to side against each other.
That's just silly.
It is silly. I don't know why you would do that.
I do have some other games here. I have Litra, which is also another German game. It is the first known electric board game.
In 19 what is this? 19 When did this come out?
This came out in 1910.
In 1910 they made an electric board game?
Yes. It is a simple quiz game that uses a board that has 48 squares with a hole in each. Each one, if you put it in like right hand spot, it would say you got it right or get it wrong. Very simple
Mhm.
game, but very unique for its time.
Interesting. I found one called Pirate and Traveler, which was released by Milton Bradley. Oh,
Ooh.
excuse me.
H.G.
Uh,
Wells publishes Little Wars.
all right then.
Yep. Oh, and Uncle Wiggily.
So clearly, there's still not a lot going on in the gaming world, which I'm not surprised by.
Yeah, there's a lot of board games, and I don't care about board games too much.
Well, it doesn't help. Most of them are quite what's the word?
Dated as hell or very boring.
Yes, these are very much old people board games. So yeah, with that wrapping up the 1910s, it was a good decade, I'd say, for media, even if a horrible tragedy was happening for half of it.
Hey, Electro Swing is amazing. Mm.
Well, when we get there, yes. Uh, yeah, I think that's everything. Any closing thoughts from you?
1910s was cool. I'm more excited about the 1920s though. That's when we get some real funny vibes.
Yes. So I think to make this the plan for the next episode is that this and the next episode are most likely going to be the last of the multi-year episodes. We're probably after next episode going to dedicate each one to a specific year. But the next time I am 90% sure we are going to be talking about the early 20s. So that's going to be 1920 to 1922, maybe 23.
Okay. Works out for
depending on
me.
how much content there is. Uh, and I'm really excited. We're starting to see some of the most famous silent films come into fruition. Uh, as a little teaser, Nosferatu is going to be one of the films we're watching next episode.
Ooh.
Yes, we're also going to see the proper birth of Hollywood. So, if you made it to the end of this, thank you so much. We really do appreciate that. If you want to do all the Electro Swing, that's why you mentioned that. Yes, Electro Swing Revival is amazing. If you made it to the end, though, we really do appreciate it. If you want to do all the social media stuff, that's just the bonus. Uh, and we will see you next time.
Yep. See you guys.